My name is Hannah Tyler, and I live in Westerville with my husband, one-year-old daughter, and soon-to-be newborn. I'm extremely proud of my family and consider every day a tremendous blessing. However, my path to motherhood, like many women, was not without heartbreak. In October of 2016, I sat in a doctor's office, sobbing into my hands, trying to stifle my cries from the people walking outside. I had just heard the devastating news that the pregnancy I had prayed for and hoped for months was not viable. The fetus had implanted in my fallopian tube, and without treatment, my life and my future fertility would be in jeopardy. I simultaneously mourned the loss of the pregnancy while fearing that at any moment my tube might burst and I would bleed to death. I also wondered if I would ever be able to conceive again. I was only aware at the time of surgical methods for removing an ectopic pregnancy. The drive to the hospital was one of the loneliest moments of my life. My husband was out of town, and I was unable to reach any family members. So I checked myself into the emergency room, and I sat alone waiting for what would come next. After the ectopic pregnancy was confirmed, the attending doctor presented me with treatment options. Despite qualifying for a non-invasive shot that would end the pregnancy, save my fallopian tube and ovary, and prevent any further growth, he advised me to consider surgery instead. His rationale was that the shot would endanger a viable pregnancy and the extremely unlikely event that there was another fetus in my uterus. I was absolutely certain that this was not the case due to blood tests showing very low levels of HCG, which is the hormone present in a woman's blood when she is pregnant. At nearly 8 weeks pregnant, my HCG levels would have needed to be at least 3 times higher than what they were in order for there to be a viable pregnancy. Despite reiterating this fact to the doctor and explaining that I was absolutely opposed to surgery, he refused to administer the shot. Instead, I had to stay overnight in the hospital and consult with my regular OBGYN, who would not be available until the following afternoon. That night was excruciating. I was scared to fall asleep, fearing that my tube would burst and I wouldn't wake up. I also knew that with every passing hour, the potential for further scarring and damage of my fallopian tubes grew, which would make it more difficult for me to conceive again in the future. I don't tell this story because I believe the parameters of Senate Bill 23 would have necessarily prevented me from ending my ectopic pregnancy. I'm sharing my story because it shows that early pregnancy is extremely complicated and can be fraught with difficult decisions. Creating blanket legislation for such a nuanced and complicated facet of healthcare will only strip women and healthcare providers of options. I fear doctors would become so cautious in offering the option to end a pregnancy due to the possibility of criminal prosecution that women will be forced to opt for treatments that are much more invasive and not only threaten their lives, but their overall reproductive health and future paths to motherhood. Additionally, had there been another fetus in my uterus with a heartbeat, would I have been forced to undergo surgery to remove the ectopic? While I likely would have opted for surgery in this circumstance, I do not think it's the legislature's role to dictate what that choice should be. Forcing a woman to undergo invasive surgery and permanent damage to her reproductive system in order to save a pregnancy that may also end up being non-viable would be a violation of the most basic right of bodily autonomy. My life and future fertility were treated as secondary to the hypothetical presence of an additional viable fetus. I do not want other women to experience what I went through, and I believe legislation like this will make my story far more common than it is now. For these reasons, I oppose Senate Bill 23, and I would urge members of the committee to as well.